Hello there, ladies and gentlemen, and boys and girls. This is Kieran from Welcome to the Abyss, and have I got an action-packed episode in store for you this evening. So this is episode 7 of my series on Irish mythology. So this is going to be based on the Éireann equals on Iran. So this is a connection between Ireland and Iran, from Druids to Zoroastrians and other ancient anomalies. So, as I'm sure you're all aware now at this stage, I've been talking about the connection between the ancient Irish and the ancient Europe, and how in our mythologies there's stories of how people have gone back and forth to Ireland and Europe over thousands of years. Something that has been denied by scholars, but given modern genetic testing, I argue that this is actually the real telling of the European history and world history. But for yourselves, I ask you to do all your own research. But please watch, if you're new to my channel, watch all the videos from the beginning where I make the case between genetics, genealogies, um, mythologies, and from visits from different places around the world. There is 100% a connection linguistically and obviously in genetics, genealogies, eh, and all that lovely stuff. But I'll carry on here. So, just for a quick recap of what I've been talking about these last few videos, what I'm basing these stories are off is the Laura Cabala Éireann. So, the Laura Cabala Éireann is the Book of Invasions, and it talks about how different groups of Ireland have gone back and forth between Ireland and mainland Europe. But it was a highly influential book that was largely accepted up until the time of the famine, otherwise known as the Irish Genocide. So early modern scholars basically said these stories were pseudo history. But as if you follow my stories or follow my channel or my other social media, that I talk about all this and I argue that no, this is totally wrong. It says this is very likely what the actual true story of Europe is, and it is something I'm working to get people talking about, get people thinking about, because this is very likely the real telling of the continent's history, not just the Irish story. Well, I'll carry on regardless. So the migrations, you got Caesar from west with Noah's Law. You got Fomorians from the underworld. So the Fomorians, I argue, are giants, titans, or people who inhabited Doggerland, who built up all these megaliths and spread from the west. If you watch my Out of the Atlantic clearly, you can see this. You can see that Parthenon could be the Parthians, but it says they're from Greece. They descend from Noah's Law. Nemeth, arguably the Medians, but please know from Scythia. Scythia is around the Indo Iranian region, which is the modern day western steppes of Noah's Law. The Firbolg, descend from Nemeth, returned from Greece of Noah's Law. Again, I argue the Firbolg could be the Sumerians. If you watch episode 5, the Tuatha Danann and Milesians are people who came from the north of the world and Scythia. But the main thing to know here, folks, is that the constant connection to the biblical story, the children of Adam or the children of Noah. And but please know very specifically that it says that all these people are related, going back and forth over thousands of years. That's the key thing to take from this. We are all one. We all come from the same root. And when you see the connections, you'll start to understand my position. So I just want to point you on to the next one. So the modern analysis, of the Laura Cabala Éireann. It says one contemporary scholar has placed a tradition of historical fabrication or pseudo history, and then another has written it's generally a spurious character with many fictions. And then the famous R.A. Stewart McAllister says there is not a single element of genuine historical detail in the strict sense of the word anywhere in the whole compilation. Well, given the fact I've got my DNA tested and it shows the connection to these regions on both my maternal and paternal side. I totally disagree with this take, and I argue that the modern scholar needs to take the Anglo glasses that they have on them, because we've received our history from our captors essentially, and it's a term I have for it called Anglo brain. So the modern scholar has Anglo brain. So what Anglo brain is people who cannot accept the history of Ireland as being anything other than what was given to us by the Brits. Now, I'm not anti-Brit. I've got I've got family over there. I've got many friends, but I will say it's the institutions that I have the issue with, because it's the institutions that keep the world on their knees essentially. And this is something. This is a paradigm I do intend to shatter with my multiple theories. But to carry on, the to show the connection. So in the Irish biblical stories, you say that the Irish descend from Japheth, who was descended of of Noah's flood, and therefore of Adam. There's a famous poem, Brian of the Brew, I think it's called, and he specifically mentions the children of Adam. Is that who the Irish are? And that these people are of noble blood. He talks about the Danes, and you think of Danes, you think of the Tuatha Danann as well. Dan being the key word in all these European stories. But again, we're just going to go for, just for argument's sake here, we're just going to show Jaffa was Europe, Shem is Asia, Ham is Africa. But I argue these were all one core group of people that inhabited these regions up until a couple of thousand years ago. For whatever disaster happened, it wiped them out. And this is where we find ourselves today. It says if anyone has been watching my theories or what I've been speaking about online, I do believe that we are essentially the apes from the planet of the apes. We will talk about this in other episodes as I go on my path as a YouTuber, I suppose, for the lack of a better word. I do hate the term content creator, because you can make content and the content could be absolute drivel, could be absolute meaningless. But to me, this is a story. This is the story of my people. This is far more than just content. And I'm sure many of you who follow me or who listen to this kind of stuff would be in total agreement. So just to show, as it says, we did state, Ars McAllister says there's not a shred of truth in these stories. Well, this is my father's side DNA. So I've talked about this on multiple occasions. But what we can see here, we got the R1B in Ireland, you got the R1B in Iran, and you can see these people have been as far east as they have been west. Now, I do disagree with the out of Africa theory. Um, if you watch episode 6, I am a proponent of the out of the Atlantic theory. So what the out of the Atlantic theory states is that we are essentially looking in the wrong spot for the origins of humanity. I believe the origins of humanity lie on what are now drowned subcontinental regions. So 8,000 years ago, there was the Storaic slide. 12,000 years ago, there was Younger Dryas impact. Apparently, there's another numerous amounts of events that happen in these different regions that would have sank the coastlines. And I reckon this is where true history lies, about 150 meters just off the coast of respective nations: America, Ireland, Britain, France. You see them off the coast of India, off the coast of Japan. There's it's something that we really need to really get the thinking caps on. Like I've previously stated, that when you think of Darwin's evolution, theory of evolution, that when our ancestors landed on the beaches, they went from the sea to the beach to the trees, went up to the trees and then came back down. But then again, what people misunderstand, and the same thing with climate change, is that the world is a totally different place today than it was 10,000 years ago, 100,000 years ago, 100 million years ago. It's all totally changed. But one thing's for certain, we are looking in the wrong place because the sea levels were 150 meters lower 15,000 years ago. So logically, if we're going to be looking anywhere for the origins of civilization, we should be looking underwater, not up in the highlands, is where we are essentially now. And that brings with it a whole other can of worms. But this is a conversation for a different time. But I shall carry on because this is quite a blockbuster of an episode. So I want to focus on the Dalcassians. So the Dalcassians are the group I descend from. As you all know, I'm a MacMahon. I'm specifically a Thomond MacMahon. My people descend from the O'Briens, who descend from the Dalcassians. The Dalcassians come from the Daisy Tuiscart, and they say they all come from Éireann and Éireann, who are the sons of Mill, blah blah. There's a whole story here, but I just want to bring your attention to the old standard of these people. So you have the Tuatha Danann, Danes. You think Dan, the tribe of Dan, and the Sword of Light. So we have the Sword of Light, Loose Sword, or New the Sword, and it's on the Sword of Light. So you think Lightbringer from Game of Thrones. You think King Arthur and Excalibur. Well, who do we also have in my name of relations? You have MacArthur here somewhere. I can't find him just yet, but he's there. He's there. There, MacArthur. Cormac MacArt. Think Art. Think Son of the Bear. So this would be somewhat explained in the next couple of slides. But then the other thing I'm going to keep an eye on is the other, if you watch my other videos where I've stated that I believe that the four treasures of the Tuatha Danann are somewhat linked to the story of the Ark of the Covenant. So the four treasures of the Tuatha Danann is the sword, the spear. The spear will come into this equation later on. A bowl and stone tablets. Again, the Ark of the Covenant story, it drops the sword, but it keeps the tablets, it keeps Aaron's rod, and it keeps the pot of manna. But I will carry on with this story. So the Dalcassian tribe, the blood of both Heber and Herman, the sons of Milzias, and united in this noble tribe is here shown. Milzias, the king of Spain, Heber, the third son of it, etc. So please, if you've not seen my channel before, you need to review the whole other episodes, episode 1 to 6, and you can see where I've gone back and forth between modern mythology, modern genetics to ancient mythology, that there's a connection right across the continent. So just to give you a bit of a rundown on who the Dalcassian tribe were, he says the sovereignty of Munster had also been settled on the alternate principle between the great tribe of Dalcassians of North Munster race, the Ogonists or Southerners. This plan of succession, as may be supposed, failed to work peaceably, and Kennedy, the father of the famous Brian Bareva, contested the sovereignty with the Ogonist Prince Callahan Cashel, but yielded in the chivalry of spirit, not very common under circumstances, and joined his former opponent in his contest with the Danes. The author of the Wars of the Gael with the Gael gives a glowing account of the genealogy of Brian and his eldest brother Matt Gowan. So, as you're all aware, I descend from the O'Briens. Matt Gowan is who I said to directly descend from, as in MacMahon. My name in Irish is MacMahuna. My name in Old Irish is Mac Gowan. So this is coming from the old root, but we get talking about the old languages now in a minute. So the two stout able valiant pillars who then governed the Dalcassian tribes, MacGowan being the actual chieftain, Brian the heir apparent. A guerrilla war was carried for some times in the woods at Thomond, which no quarter was given on either side, and was woe to either party to meet the other. So MacGowan, Mahoon, a well-known Irish name signifying a bear, born by the brother of Brian Boru and common among the O'Briens, O'Connors, O'Farrells, but now disguised under the anglicised form of Matthew, or Latin Magamus. So it's, if again, you need to look at the Milesian genealogies, you need to look at the Irish story where we talk about the genetics genealogies. Again, it's a beautiful story. Unfortunately, not an awful lot of people actually realize that we have here. And I've been posting about on different channels and different stories online, and it's something that I think is key going forward. So I think people really need to reconnect with their past and their ancestors if we are going to go forward in the world, because I think the world is going in totally the wrong direction at the moment. But hopefully, work like this is what's going to wake sleeping bears, essentially. But I shall carry on. So, in the early Irish genealogy tracks, the Éireann are regarded as an ethnic group distinct from the Lagan, the Cruachan. Population groups in Munster classes Éireann include the Cork Uluda in southwest County Cork and the Muskrat in counties Cork and Tipperary, the Cork Dubna in County Kerry, and the Cork Baskin in West County Clare. Dalriada and Dalfriatic or Ulad in Ulster are also considered Éireann. Now, please know that these are the people who moved into Scotland. So these people were called Alba, or Scotland up until 1,000 years ago was called Scota Minor, and Ireland was Scota Major. But again, when you think of Éireann and you think of Irish mythology, you think of the connection to Scythia. But then when you see the name Éireann, you think Iran. Again, it's a constant theme back and forth. Éireann, Iran, Scythia, all the same people. But I shall carry on. The Éireann appeared to have been a powerful group in proto-historic period, but in early historical times were largely reduced to politically marginal status, with the notable exception of the Enamalthi Osra. The most important of the Munster Éireann, the Cork Luda, retained some measures of prestige, even after they had become marginalised by the Oganata in the 7th or 8th century. It is likely that the sometimes powerful Ulitin and their close kin of the Euphragenti originally belonged to the Éireann Darina as well, but were later counted among the Oganata for political reasons. Another prominent Éireann people of early Munster are believed to have been the Martina, who, by the early historical period, have completely vanished from the Irish landscape, although they may be in part ancestral to the later Daisy Tuaskert and the Dalcash. The Daisy Moomin may have also had Iran origins, but this has long been disputed. So again, we're looking at the connections. Iran, Éireann, right? But there's more. So the Averni were a people of early Ireland first mentioned Ptolemy's 2nd century geography as living in the stream southwest of the island. He also locates a city called Ivernus in their territory and observes that this settlement has the same name as the island as a whole, Ivernia. These Iverni can be identified linguistically with the Éireann, a people attested in the Munster and some elsewhere in the early Middle Ages. The prehistoric Iran royal dynasties are sometimes referred to as the Darana, and remember, Ara, Era. The name Averni has been derived from archaic Irish, meaning folk of Eru, the island of Ireland. This in turn derived from the Proto-Celtic, I'm not even going to attempt to say that word, because I'm going to butcher it, and we're further from Proto-Indo-Puran, the fertile land, which is cognate with the ancient Greek Piera and Sanskrit Pavara, which refer to fertile land. John T. Kosh claims it was probably once the name given to all these peoples in Ireland, but by Ptolemy's time had a more restricted usage applicable to the inhabitants of the southwest. Iberia and Iverni, no connection. Note later in slides. So that's just a little note I've left for myself, so I don't forget to mention this as I go along my discussions. So without further ado, we shall carry on. So the O'Briens. So the surname O'Brien is of Irish origin, derived from the Gaelic O'Brien, meaning descendant of Brian. The name Brian is linked to the Old Irish word Bree, meaning noble, high, or exalted. Thus, O'Brien carries connotations of nobility or high status. It is one of the most common surnames in Ireland, historically associated with the descendants of Brian Boru, the famous 11th century High King of Ireland. So again, we're going to be noting the noble people the fertile land. It's a common theme as we go through these ancient stories, these ancient people, the noble, the fertile land. There's a connection between the people and the land. And then we're going to see the case with the languages. So Phineas Farsad, a legendary king of Scythia. In Irish mythology, he is credited in some traditions with inventing the Ogham alphabet and the Gaelic language. According to Ardra Septna Eris, Phineas discovered four alphabets: Hebrew, Gaelic, Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and Ogham. Considered the Ogham the most perfected because it was developed last. He reportedly travelled to the plain of Shinar to study the languages dispersed after the Tower of Babel's collapse, sending 72 scholars to learn them. After a decade, he created a refined language, Gaelic, from the best elements of these tongues, along with the Ogham writing system known as Bet Lewis Newen, naming its letters after his top scholars. However, these accounts are mythological and historical evidence for Phineas or his contributions is lacking, with Ogham's origins more likely tied to early medieval Ireland. No, Farsi is a language of the Persians. So again, Farsi, Scythia, Persia, Iran, Éireann. Like, we know there's a genetic connection. We know there's a linguistic connection. We know there's a structural connection, as in the megaliths. So why, again, are we trying to say that there's no connection? Again, this to me is Anglo brain. It says, if you are looking at this evidence laid out in front of you, and you do not accept this as new evidence to say, hold on a second, there obviously is quite an ancient connection here. Why are we not looking at this? Why are we taking the opinions of people from 200 years ago who had a vested interest in burying this story? You know what I mean? It's there's something more to this. Now the other thing I do argue, I argue Ogham is the root script, and in relation to the Hebrew, Greek, Latin, and Ogham, I reckon the Hebrew could be Phoenician, and as I argue Ogham is the root, I think he could be talking about modern Gaelic, or what would be Old Irish now at this stage. But these are all theories that I will have to work on as we go along. But to move on to the next, I want to show people a map of Scythia. So Scythia is over in the west there, and you can see you got your Scythia, you got Parthia, Indo-Scythians, Middle Kingdoms of India. But the key thing is these are all people who were related and migrated back and forth over thousands of years. Like, there's a whole Indo-European story here that again needs to be noted. And I do want to know something important here. The Scythia, you think the Scotoi, the Scots. There's a root language here. There's like, you look at the root names. Linda, who I've often mentioned on the channel here, she was brilliant in regards to showing the connections between the languages. And again, I'd love to get her on and just have her talk about all our great work that she's been doing over the years. And even we between the two of us, we talk about what we've spoke about personally, as opposed to me just posting the stuff that we've been talking about. Because again, it's an amazing story that people should really, really, really wake themselves up to, because it's one Indo-Aryan culture that has been buried, and we've been left divided. But you can take from this what you will. But as I go through the slides, you're going to see the connections, and it's going to be extremely hard for people to deny now at this stage. So the next slide, we've got in Greco-Roman geography, Iberia, ancient Greek, Latin, Hiberia, you think Ireland as Hibernia, was an exonym of the Georgian kingdom of Cartly, you think Cartilage, or Iberia. Now, as I previously stated, look at the connection between the Iberians. So you got Iberian in the east, you got Iberia in the west. You got Hiberia in the east, you got Hibernia in the west. And the kingdom, so again, the kingdom existed during classical antiquity and the early Middle Ages, either as an independent state or is it dependent of larger empires, notably the Sassanid? So the Sassanid, you think of English, so that's what English is in Irish, and the Roman empires. Iberia, centered on present-day eastern Georgia, was bordered by Colchis in the west, Caucasian Albania in the east, and Armenia in the south. Historian Aldufa Dominguez Mondero argues that the name Iberia was given by ancient Greeks to two different peoples located at the extremities of their world, in the Iberian Peninsula and the Caucasus, due to the mythical wealth associated with them, Tartessos and the Golden Fleece of Colchis. Notes Cestris. So Cestris, he was an Egyptian pharaoh that went all around Europe and made his mark. This is another historic fact, but it's something I've been looking at. But again, I just want to bring people's attention. You mean to tell me you've got Iberia in the west and you got an Iberia in the east, and there is no connection between these two groups of people? And not to mention the fact that in our mythologies, it specifically says the connection to Scythia. It talks about these people going back and forth between Greece and Spain, Ireland, and Iberia. Like, are you sure when we're talking about these Irish stories, we're not talking about Iberia as in Iberia in the east, as in the Caucasus? And this is where these people made their way from. But again, it's up to people to do their own research. I can only point out now. This is something that the great witch Linda came up with. She says, "Well, you got Iberia. This is ancient Iberia. Why, why is there nobody talking about this?" So again, we show Iberia, but the Iberian Peninsula in Western Europe, where modern-day Spain, Portugal, Andorra, Gibraltar, and part of southern France. Ancient use, the Greeks and Romans called the peninsula Iberia, after the river Iberus or Ebro. So again, you think Iber from Irish mythology, and the people, the Iberians, were pre-Roman peoples along the eastern and southern coasts, not Celts, though Celts were later mixed with them. The legacy of the term stuck for the whole peninsula today. Spain and Portugal are often called Iberian. So I'll give you an interesting fact. Now, we mentioned Corco Basque earlier on, but the Basque have a strong connection between Ireland as well. So in the west specifically, where my dad's people come from, this is Spanish. There's a strong Spanish connection. Even the story from my grandfather Tommy, that he was very dark. He was very Spanish, very very dark. And I even get that sometimes myself, that I could be quite dark. But these days I'm a little bit more silver, but and half ginger. But well, I shall digress. So on to the next. So again, we're just somewhat talking about these linguistic connections. So you got Iberia in the east, you got Iberia in the west. Now we have people called the Gael, the Gradles in Ireland. But if you look, you got Galicia, Spain, and there is a famous statue of a Spanish king, and he's an Irish king, he's a Celtic king, and it's beside the Tower of Hercules. It's King Benzius. But you also have the Gaul, which would be in the France region. You got Galatia around Turkey, and you got Galicia in Poland/Ukraine. So again, if you look at Iberia in the east, you got Iberia in the west. You got all these regions with a root called Gaul. You got Gaels in Ireland, you got Gaul in France, Gaul in Spain, Gaul in Eastern Europe, and you got Gaul in Turkey. Why are people not looking at this connection and saying, well, hold on a pair of minutes here, there's obviously there's something here. Now again, you have to look at my other videos to talk about, we can talk about the Sumerian connection and the other stuff that's gone on with monuments. But I have to move on, sadly. So I do have an interest in Persian mythology. I always had quite an interest in it. Well, I always had quite an interest in ancient history and ancient mythologies. But Persian story was quite interesting to me. But when I came across this story, this really blew my mind, and this connects to the Éireann tribe. It's very specific about the Connacht and the Éireann tribe in the west of Ireland. So Ellen Trekant, Connacht Éireann nobility. In the province of Connacht, the homeland of the Éireann nobility, a monstrous being appears. The creature is called Ellen Trekant, a three-headed monster, sometimes boar-like, sometimes serpent-like. It rises from below the earth, out of the cave of Cruachan, a mythic gateway to the other world. The monster brings fire and devastation across Ireland. The poet hero Imogen MacEckett rises up and slays the monster, saving the land and restoring order. The tale ties Connacht's royal centre, Cruachan slash Tara, to a myth of chaos defeated by a heroic culture. So the other thing about this, when this guy came out of the underworld, he also had a lot of beings with him. Now, as it says, I'm in this research I've been doing. I've been looking at the connections between ancient Ireland and ancient Iran. So, to my surprise, when I actually did go looking in regards to an Iranian similarity, a similar story here, I found the Azi Dahaka. So, in the region of Tara, Tehran, in Iran, a monstrous tiger called Azi Dahaka, as the Zahak, emerges. He's a three-headed, six-eyed demon spirit described in Zoroastrian texts as one of Angkor Mainu's great creations. Like Ellen Trekant, he rises from below, associated with darkness, corruption, and the underworld powers. Again, this fella had bronze minions with him as well. So this is another similarity that I forgot to include. So the Azzi Dahaka rules over Turan Tara, a region near Media. So the Media, think the Medians, and obviously the Caucasus region, sometimes rendered as Tara in later texts. The hero Turatena, later Ferry Dun, defeats him. In early texts, he slays him. In the later epic, he chains him beneath the Mount Damavand, where he will remain until the world's end. Ferry Dun's victory ushers in justice, prosperity, and order after an age of ruin. So again, you've got Tara in the east, you got Tara in the west. Now you have Tara in Ireland, you've got Tara in Iran, you've got Tara in Russia, and then over in India, and in Indian mythology, you have Tara, who is the green goddess who is associated with lunar worship. Now, the Zoroastrians themselves aren't associated with fire worship, but in Ireland, you can see fire worship in regards to Baal. You think Baltana, okay? But then we also have Tara. So when you think of Baal or Baal, you think of solar worship. You think the sun. So that's the connection with the Zoroastrians. But then in relation to the lunar, you have Tara. But then the other thing is you think of waters, because obviously the moon is tidally locked, so this actually controls the waters. So you can see Tara, or sorry, the moon or the lunar cycles is associated with water, and then obviously the sun, Baal, fire worship. So you've got two ancient, and to even in obviously modern, the story is you've got, this is all about fertility. So you got heat, the sun, and you got water, both life-giving entities. This to me is the cosmic duality that we see between the Druids and the Zoroastrian priests. Now, it's a case of what came first, the chicken, the egg. Again, I firmly believe that the root came from the west with the Druids, and this is who the ancient order were, and they became the Zoroastrians. And there was a whole story there with this, but unfortunately, I cannot get too much into that because I'll go off in many directions with this. But to stay on the scope of work here. So with the similarities and connections of monsters from below, both Ellen Trekant and Azzy Dahaka rise from the subterranean or underworld origins. They both have three-headed chaos. Both are described as three-headed beings, a rare and striking overlap. Heroes of nobility, both Imogen, the Irish poet hero of Connacht, Iran, again, Iran equals Iran, and Feridun, the Iranian champion, stand as heroic figures who restore balance. The sacred centres, the battles of Korat are near Tara Kurgan in Ireland and Turan Tara in Iran, both sacred political centres of kingship. The mythic archetype, both embody the Indo-European dragon slayer myth, a noble hero versus a monstrous serpent chaos being who threatens the world. The cultural role after victory, both heroes symbolise a renewal of society and the legitimacy of their people's nobility. Now, please note there is other examples. You have it in the Indian epic and the the Scandinavian epics where they talk about the Dragon Slayer myths. But I did note that in my research. But given the Iran connection, you can't deny how close this is, because then again, like the Irish were specifically associated with the serpent because the Druids were recognized as serpents. The Order never had serpents. So again, I've stated previously, the Druids who represented the serpent represented knowledge, they were driven out by St. Patrick. Now, there is another point I want to make, but this is actually going to be for the next video because I'm going to be talking about the Ireland and India connection. But we will talk about that in the next video. But I just want to focus specifically on the Ireland and Persian connection. So we have that one story. You can argue, oh well, it's an Indo-European thing. Well, yeah, but there's another story that connects Ireland directly with Persia. So the spear with the king of Persia. In Irish tradition, a deadly spear was said to have belonged to the king of Persia. The three warriors from Ireland were sent east to claim it. When they reached Persia, they discovered the spear was so fierce that it had to be kept either bound in a cloth or immersed in a cauldron of water. Otherwise, were burst into flames and slain indiscriminately. The three succeeded in bringing the weapon back to Ireland, where it became known as the Luana Calta, later also linked to Lu and even Cuchulainn. The spear was unstoppable in battle, but each time it was cast, it had to be quenched again, or it would destroy everything around it. As I mentioned, the ancestral weapons of the Tuatha Danann. You got Lu's spear. So Lu's champion with the Tuatha Danann. Again, the Tuatha Danann, who also have an Aryan connection, wield a terrible spear called Aravar, also known as the Spear of Lu. In some traditions, it originally belonged to the king of Persia. The weapon was so fierce and had to be kept either in a cauldron of water or wrapped in a sleeping cover, otherwise it would burst into flames and slay indiscriminately. In battle, it was irresistible. Once cast, no enemy could escape it. This layer was counted among the four treasures of the Tuatha Danann, brought from the other world city of Gorgias, and later associated with the other warriors of the Celtar and the Cuchulainn. So, again, we have the Irish connection to the Iranian or the Persian connection. These are ancient stories. Like this is all researchable. You could just search the story up yourself. It's just that between me and Linda, we didn't have the, I suppose, academic bias where we could freely look at these connections and investigate without saying, well, that could never happen. Because now we've got the genetic proof, we've got the mythological proof, we've got the similarities right across all these cultures. Like it's undeniable. But I have to carry on, folks, because I'm trying to pack as much into this episode as quickly as I possibly can. Now, I came across this article in the last couple of years. So it was Éireann, Ireland, and Iran, the land of the noble ones. So in Indo-European myths, West points out that both the name Iran and the Irish Éire come from Ara, a noble lord. Developed from the same root as the Zoroastrian Ahriman, are literally Aryanis, the divine principle of God, honor, goodness, virtue, and nobility. West mentions other cognates with the Zoroastrian Ahriman in other Indo-European languages, including the other name title of Odin Irmar, the Irish Erman, and the Old English Emerson, noble multi-race. The poet Gathus of prophet Zarathustra start with the will to become godlike and the noble lordship of the higher ordeal. This PDF that I have referenced comes from a chap called Alex Ardeshir Faramand. So this connection isn't new. This is a connection that people have known about. And as I said to people previously, the more you look deeper into the story, the deeper it goes. It's like, hold on a second, there has to be something here. It's undeniable now at this stage. But then if you go back to the O'Briens, and it meaning noble, the O'Briens, I argue, descend from the Iberians. Think Eber, because the O'Briens descend from Eber. They're noble. Aryans mean noble. It's a Zoroastrian connection. It's up to people to turn around and say to themselves, well, look, we'll have to investigate this. Now again, anyone can argue, well, this is rubbish. There's no way this ever happened. Well, it's not unknown that there has been a Persian connection to these islands. So the Galloway Hoard vessel, the textiles were studied and retained for further analysis, and laser cleaning has helped reveal further details of the vessel, including crowns, fire altars, leopards, and tigers. The imagery is considered unusual in Western Europe, with researchers stating that it is associated with Zoroastrianism, the state religion of the Sasanian Empire in Iran, before Islam became the more widely accepted practice faith during the 7th and 18th centuries. New scientific analysis has confirmed the materials used to make the vessel originated in what is now central Iran. Now, I want to bring your attention to this item here. So this fella reminds me of the Torque. This fella here reminds me of crosses that we've often seen in Ireland, but also there's a thing called St. Martin's Shrine that looks exactly like these four spheres. So the question is, if there's no connection, why was this found in Bleeding Scotland? You know what I mean? But to give a wider map of the Zoroastrian influence across the world. So this is a distribution of late Sasanian finds outside the boundaries of the late 6th century Sasanian Empire. So obviously that's the reason that we're talking about. There's a reason in Britain, all over Western Europe, Eurasia, into Asia, Africa. Like, these people were all over. And again, I argue that these people not only transversed land, but they were the people of being able to sail. Who would you think would be the Phoenicians, the Phoenicians? Then I always refer back to the book called Chronicles of Erie, which clearly states about the solar worship with the Baal, and then lunar worship being water. So this is where I begun to understand that this is where the real ancient culture is. It's their fertility cults is who we all descend from, because the ancients knew that the sun and moon were both vital to our very existence on Earth, and that is quite a profound observation when you think about it, because like, we don't respect what we have in front of us now. We think it's just being given to us. But you understand that to these people, that they had to strive for everything. It wasn't just put on a plate for them or bought out of a supermarket. They had to hunt, they had to farm, they had to watch the seasons. So this is where I can see, in regard to the Zoroastrian story, of why they believed in the cosmic order. Because there was a duality of light and dark, fire and water, almost ice and fire from the Game of Thrones series. And it's quite interesting, but I'll give you a quick summary of the similarities between Amazon and Zoroaster or Fairy Done. So in both the Irish and Iranian cultures, they both had priest poets. So both were spiritual leaders who used sacred poetry or hymns to express divine truth. Amazon through his Song of Amazon, and Zoroaster through the Gathas. They were both lawgivers. So the lawgivers were the Breton laws in the Irish example. And so what this says here is that each served as a judge or moral guide. Amazon among the Milesians and Orden, and Zoroaster through the Zoroastrian and ethical teachings. The cosmic connection, the words invoke the elemental or cosmic forces, as previously stated, with the sun and moon, claimed identity with wind, sea, and sky. Zoroaster spoke of divine forces, and Misha spent as governing creation. The power of speech, both used poetic speech as a magical or divine act. Amazon calmed the storm, Zoroaster purified the world with truth and prayer. And the Indo-European roots, each embodies the archetype of the Indo-European priest prophet linked to Ireland and Iran through shared ancestral traditions. So again, these are not unknown connections. Like like our story says, we are rooted in Scythia, but then other books have stated, no, they came from the west, went to Scythia, and then went back. But when you think about the turbulence that would have happened in Western Europe at that time, you can kind of see why they had to leave, why they migrated back and forth. Again, these were seasonal people, they were tribal people, they went all around the world. But I should carry on. So the Sasanians, they was the last pre-Islamic Persian empire founded by Ardashir. After defeating the Parthians, it spanned modern-day Iran, Iraq, and parts of Central Asia, the Caucasus, and the Near East. Known as the centralized administration, Zoroastrianism is the state religion, and cultural achievements in art, architecture, and science. It was a major rival to the Roman Byzantine Empire. The empire failed the Arab-Muslim contest in the 7th century. The term Sassanach, also spelled Sassanach or Sassanach, is an Irish Gaelic word used to refer to an English person, or more broadly, someone from England. It is derived from the word for English Sasna, which is England, which itself comes from the Old English term for the Saxons. Historically, it could carry a neutral or derogatory connotation, depending on context, often used to distinguish the English from the Irish, especially during times of political tension. So, I want to point out this. So again, I pointed out the Galloway Horde where you've seen the example of the four spheres. Now, again, I want you to pay important. The symbology here is just as important as the architecture, the people, the genetics, the genealogies. But just to give you the rundown, the Dervish Kavian was a royal standard of the Sasanian Empire, traces his legendary origins to the blacksmith Kava. He was raised his leather apron on as a spear as a symbol of revolt. In his Shamnama, after victory, the apron was adorned with jewels and transformed into a royal banner, embodying Persian resistance and identity. By the late Sasanian era, it had become a richly jeweled standard on a purple field. Now, the purple color is a symbol of nobility, and who else? Phenoi, but we'll digress on that one. And often features the lotus or the star motif, Aktar, with a red, gold, and purple streamers symbolising divine fortune and divine kingship and traditional unity. It was carried into battle in using court rituals during the Battle of the Yel Kadisha. In November 636 CE, it was captured, rhetorically retrieved by Zera it Kitab, and stripped of its gems before being burned by the Caliph Umar. Though it was destroyed, its legacy endures in Iranian culture and memory as a powerful emblem of national pride and resistance. So again, I want people to focus on this. This is important. So this here, this whole thing here, I know I'm terrible at drawing lines, but this is on a laptop, folks. We look at the next slide. We're going to be looking at the crown here. See the crown? We're going to look at the crown. You got the spear. You got the other symbol here, which is fleur de lis. But we're going to talk about that another time. But we're going to focus on the sphere. And we're going to talk about this symbol here. So that's a crown of the Brits. And then this is the Ardagh chalice. Again, look at the symbology, folks. This is the same symbol. Now, how could anyone not look at these three symbols? The Iranian example, the British example, and the Irish example. This is the same symbology. There is no doubt. Who do all these people say they descend from? From people from Scythia. So this is the connection from Ireland to Britain to Iran. They've gone back and forth, and it's the same styles. You know what I mean? Like, again, people can say what they want. I do not believe it is a coincidence that these symbols are there. Now, the Iran Shah is the King of Kings in the Persians. But again, you think of Éireann, you think of Ireland. Who were the people in Ireland were high kings, noble blood? Again, these noble origins. Who were the noble origins? These were the people of Atlantis, in my opinion. This is who we all descend from. These were the gods that people talk about in all these mythologies. But just to remind people, the Queen Elizabeth and King Charles III are descendants of the High King Brian Boru. So they descend from these Iberians themselves. We're all connected. This is the story. These are Persian nobility. This is the Indo-European story right in front of us. Let's look at this next symbol. You got the solar symbolism, the crown. You got the Lion of Judah. You got the lions on the O'Brien crest. You got the lions in the English. You got the lions on the Denmark crest as well. We are all related. This is our story, folks. And as it says, it's time to wake sleeping bears. Now, I'm coming towards the end of the slides, but I want to show a couple of pictures that show other similarities in architecture and styles. So on the left here, this fella here is called a Shade in the Gig. I can't recall where this is from, but again, you got flower-like symbolism here. You've got the trifecta or the spirals, and you got this man, right? So you got men and women depicted as these are called Shade in the Gig. These are fertility symbols. But then you've got this bronze plaque dated between 1500 and 700 BCE. Western Iran now housing the Louvre Museum. But again, look at the symbology. Spheres, goats, and you've got the same actions as the Shade in the Gig. Now, I don't know, folks. Like, these are very specific symbols that unless you were familiar with them, you'd say, nah, there's no connection there. But given the fact that I'm familiar with them, I'm saying, hold on a second, there's 100% similarities here that people really need to be looking at. Now, I know people will probably give me a lot of abuse, and they actually have done about me talking about this Aryan connection, but it's undeniable. Like it's right there in front of you. You just need to connect the dots. Now, I'm gonna go to the next page here. So this is from Clonmacnoise. So Clonmacnoise, this fella here doing the Buddha pose. Just gonna draw a picture so you see who I'm talking about. He's doing the Buddha pose. This is a Celtic god called Cernunnos or Kiranos or whatever. Now he's doing the Buddha-like pose, but this is an ancient god on these stone carvings in Ireland, in Clonmacnoise. Now I want to know the case about the smith in the Sasanian story. Now in Clonmacnoise, these people were famous smiths, masons, and carpenters. These were people were master builders. They went in. Now they say that in the modern Irish story that these people went into Europe and spread Christianity. But I argue this is the original solar cult that people followed. These are the ones who brought civilization. And then the next thing I want to point out is the swastika here. There's a swastika in Ireland. Now, there's numerous examples of swastikas in Ireland, and I'm just going to point out some others. So this is Clonmacnoise, which is in Westmeath, Offaly, or Westmeath. This example here on the left, you got swastikas again, and you got what's known as a solar cross. This is in Kerry. This example of the swastika is in Musseldan Temple in Free Derry. And I want to bring your attention to a church that's actually associated with the O'Briens and the McMahons. So the resurrection of Christ, the panel is divided into two parts. The one panel is the resurrection scene, holding a cross staff. The labarum is charged with a swastika. So we're just going to underline these bits here. And sleeping soldiers lying beneath off soldiers wear base nets and advertising bazaars. So it does say in the other example that the swastika is related to the solar cross. And I do want to know that she holds the figure is generally taken to represent Marnie Bruin, wife of Terence McMahon of the McMahon tomb. So where this image is, so the swastika itself is here. You can't see it, it's not a great image, but it's there. As you can see, it's noted here that it's there. But this is in Ennis Friary in County Clare in Western Ireland. This is where my people are from, on my dad's side of the family are from. And you've got an image of Jesus Christ with a swastika. So, as far as I'm aware, I've never seen that association anywhere in anything I've come across. But we know that the Irish, or these group of Gaels, have a connection to the Éireann, as in the Erainn. So the Éireann, who would be Iberians, I argue, are from Iran, as in Scythia. So this image of Jesus, or Isa, the cult of Isa, with a swastika, this is a solar symbol. These are astronomical worshippers. This is astronomy. This is a story being told here. But I think people don't realize what the actual story is. Now, I know it's crazy that you hear some of the Irish Arians now, but I'm not the only one who was seeing this stuff. A recent book I came across is The Aryan Origin of Gaelic Race and Language. This was written a couple of 100 years ago by some reverend. Now, I haven't read the book yet. I have it there, it's on the list. But again, up until 150, 200 years ago, this story was being told. People were talking about this, and then it went dead. But I argue this was down to the famine. This is due to the Irish genocide. And that from that period, this is when modern history was stolen. This is when the story was totally changed. So hopefully now, as I show these connections to people, that people are going to say, hold on a minute here. Are you mean to tell me that all this stuff, like Orden has ancient mounds, T-shaped pillars, noble bloodlines, noble genetics, genealogies, the story of Europe, like, and the connection to Egypt. Like, again, I implore the viewer or the listener to say, hold on a second. Yeah, I have to do my own research on this. Like, people, this is all available online. This is not just me coming up with this stuff from the top of my head. This is years of research between me, Linda, and numerous other people who I spoke to online. Who said, and I'm trying to show people, it's like, there's a story here that we need to tell, and for us to go forward, we need to look at the true story and carry that forward with us. But I'm gonna just refer to people again. This is I know I've linked this image numerous times, but I just want to show this is the Irish are a noble race. So it is astonishing and somewhat unique to Ireland that such a large proportion of our population can, by their surname, construct a detailed account of their medieval patrilineal ancestry with records which are evidently accurate back to the Iron Age, in some cases many millions, or in some cases ancient royal heirs. But who is it we descend from? We are the sons of Adam, or the children of Adam. This is our story. This is the story of Europe. This is our story, and I know people probably say that, I don't want to say it now, but far right. But this is quite obviously, I'm referencing historical record here. This isn't anything to do with the modern German head case. This is our ancient story. This is our culture. This is who we are as a people. And I think our history has been stolen from us. And talking about this stuff really like this without any bias is going to hopefully wake people up to there's a different story here. Regardless if I'm right or wrong, I'm not the only one who's seen these connections. As it says, I've referenced numerous books now at this stage that say, hold on a second, you need to review this story. Like, you've got Chronicles of Ridley, you got the Irish Origins of Civilization, you got the Aryan Origins of the Gaelic Race. There's 3 books there you can have a look yourself. Orden or the Chaldee. I think I mentioned that one already. I've definitely mentioned that on the channel. It's up to you to conduct your own research and formulate your own opinions, because modern history and historians, archaeologists, they're full of the brown stuff. Like, as it says, to me, Ireland holds the key to the lost civilization question, but it's been totally neglected. And I'd say deliberately kept out of the equation because we've got so much here that is being hidden and buried. But again, hopefully with me making these videos, that it starts to wake people up to say, hold on a second, again, we need to review this. But I'm going to stop waffling on, folks. I'm going to start wrapping this up, okay? So again, I want to reiterate the Milesian genealogies. As the Milesians were the last of the ancient colonists and had subdued the races previously existing in Ireland, only their genealogies, with a few exceptions, have been preserved. The genealogical tree begins, therefore, with the brothers Eber and Éireann, the two surviving leaders of the expedition, where those ancestors are traced back to Magog, the son of Japhet. The great southern chieftains, such as the McCarthys and the O'Briens, claim descent from Eber. The northern families of O'Connor, O'Donnell, and O'Neill claim Éireann as their head. There are also other families claiming descent from Emer, the son of Er, brother to Eber and Éireann, and is also from the cousin Luga, the other son of It. From these four sources, the principal Celtic families of Ireland are sprung. Though they do not quite trace the line up to the Grand Elgarden and his wife, they have a pedigree which cannot be gainsaid, and which might be claimed with pride by many a monarch, and which they do. From Lost Records is the most perfect work of the kind of extant, but there are tracks of the Book of Leinster and the Book of Ballymouth, which are of the highest authority. O'Curry is of opinion that these book links were copied from the Salter Castle of other contemporary works. The historical use of these genealogies is very great, not only because they give an authentic pedigree and approximate data for chronological calculation, but from the immense amount of correlative information they contain. Every freeborn man of the tribe is entitled by blood, when it comes his turn to succeed to the chieftaincy. Hence the exactitude with which each pedigree was kept, hence their importance in the estimation of each individual. Hence the incidental matter they contain, by the mention of such historical events as may have acted on different tribes and families, by which they lost their inheritance or independence, and consequently their claim, however remote, to the chieftaincy. The ancient history of a people should always be studied with care and candour by those who, as a matter of interest or duty, wish to understand their social state and the government best suited for that state. Many of the poorest families in Ireland are descendants of ancient chiefs. The old habit, the habit which defined, deepened, and intensified itself during centuries, cannot be eradicated. Though it may be ridiculed, and the peasant will still boast of his blood, it is all he has left of him, of the proud inheritance of his ancestors. Now, as I said to people, it is up to you to conduct your own research. And I look at this as a sense of duty. This is my calling, I feel, to show people this is our story. This is the story of our people. And looking where the world is going now, we need to unite and work together, because things are not going well at the moment in the world, I'm afraid. But as it says, it's time to wake up. So, finally, in conclusion, regardless of what modern scholars say, there is an obvious, unexplored ancient connection here that needs to be investigated. Ireland and the Irish were part of an ancient European culture that has been totally forgotten about over the last number of years. Something I intend to change, and time to wake up sleeping bears. I hope you enjoy. So as always, folks, thank you very much for taking the time to watch this video, or review this presentation. As always, if anyone has any questions or wants to talk about it, let's have a chat. Let's talk about this great history. As it says, it's something beautiful. And again, it's time to wake up. Good night. Cheers.